Want to go now to CBS News producer Portia Siegelbaum, who joins us on the phone from Havana, Cuba. Portia, obviously Cuba took a direct hit, really hammered the northern part of Cuba. In fact, meteorologists I spoke to yesterday say the reason that it had slowed down by the time it reached the United States was because it slammed into the island of Cuba. Talk about what conditions are like there in Havana.
Stephanie, things are really just beginning to recover here a bit. Most of the island and all of the capital is without electricity. And the hurricane didn't even hit Havana. We got the most outer bands, but the winds were extremely violent. It's amazing the destruction, the amount of trees that are down, and just plants that look like they were burnt with a blowtorch, all the leaves off. In the capital, where the storm didn't come, there were 36-foot waves that flooded streets along the coast in Havana, so people in some areas were waist-high or even chest-high in water. And the destruction where the storm actually hit in the central and eastern part, both to housing, to the electrical system, and to agriculture, is just overwhelming.
We are reading that at least 10 people were killed in Cuba by Hurricane Irma, which made landfall there on the island late Friday. It was a Category 5 hurricane at that point. As you mentioned, we were talking mostly as at the central part of the island, but I understand even folks in Havana, the capital, which is more on the western side, also felt it. Can you talk about what that was like to go through a Category 5 hurricane? I imagine you were also experiencing the massive hurricane winds.
We were, and let me just say 7 of the 10 people that died were in Havana. And some of them just refused to the evacuation order, and the buildings that they live in, there's a lot of dilapidated housing in the island, and particularly in Havana, and the house collapsed on 2 brothers that were together. In another case, 2 women not from Havana were in a bus, and a 4th-floor balcony fell down on the bus and killed them, 2 young 27-year-old women. So Havana, not being in the eye of the storm, not being in the center of the hurricane, really lost the most people. But again, most of it was accidents. A 71-year-old guy who was out trying to bring down an antenna once the storm hit. So it were people who didn't listen to evacuation orders. The wind was incredible here. We were out filming the waves when they first started coming in Friday night and Saturday, and the Jeep we were riding in was just blowing from side to side on the street. Trees and branches were falling down all around us. It was very scary.
There's not, you know, I've been to Cuba a couple of times, and I'm watching these extraordinary pictures of the middle of Havana, streets being flooded and people just walking around them. They don't have the kind of infrastructure, obviously, that we have here in the United States. Where do people go? Are there government shelters? Are they getting essentials, food and water and health care if they're injured or need that?
Absolutely. They set up government shelters everywhere where they were evacuating people. And those centers have cooks. You know, they're provided with food. They have medical teams sent up in them also, particularly pregnant women, the elderly, anyone ill. Most Cubans choose to go to the homes of friends or relatives. And Cubans are very willing. Cubans who live in better housing and on higher ground always open their doors to family and friends.
Yeah.
But there are these government shelters. And, for example, a tourist resort like Varadero in Matanzas province, they evacuated like 70,000 people there.
Wow.
So it's a big process, and they don't have as many resources as we have in the U.S.
And you talk about Varadero, which has become really an engine for the burgeoning tourism economy there in Cuba. What do you see as being the long-term impacts of Irma on this island?
Not just Varadero. The storm where it first touched land was Cayo Romero, one of the northern offshore keys. And those are the keys, Cayo Guillermo, Cayo Largo, Santa Maria, where there are all the inclusive resorts. They had to evacuate thousands of Canadian tourists before the storm hit. And Raul Castro issued a rather upbeat statement this morning, whereas he said that, well, yes, terrible destruction, but we're going to get those tourism places back up and running before the peak tourist season. it's going to cost the country a lot. It's a tremendous economic blow to have to get everything back in shape, to rebuild. But they want to do it because that's one of their main sources of hard currency earnings.
And we should say that Cuba is actually faring a lot better, from what it sounds like Portia is reporting, than other Caribbean islands like St. Martin, where they have even less infrastructure, and where we are hearing some pretty disturbing stories about lawlessness and the inability of governments to fully get a handle on the aftermath of this storm. Portia reporting from Havana, Cuba, Portia Siegelbaum. Portia, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Stephanie.